Welcome to Two Humans Talking, the podcast that talks about what it takes to be healthy and stay healthy in this modern, fast paced world. I'm your host, Tiffany Simms, and today I am here with Wendy Leggett, who is going to talk to us about retirement. And before you tune out, I want you to stick around because we're going to talk. Everyone's always telling us about like financial planning and what that looks like to retire financially. But no one's talking to us about all the non-financial pieces of what it looks like to retire. No one's really talking to us about what it's like to have aging parents who are entering retirement and the things that we can help advocate for on their behalf that they may not know to advocate for themselves. And so I'm really excited to have Wendy here on the show with us today to just pull back the curtain and really share with us what we need to be talking about and looking at so that we don't get caught off guard and think there's something wrong with us
Mm.
as we start navigating those different chapters of our life. So, Wendy, with that, thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to have you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And thank you for that beautiful introduction to the topic because you really, really hit it on the head. So fantastic
Yeah.
to get to chat with you about it.
Yes, you are so welcome. Um, Tell us who you are, where do you live, what makes you you beyond the retirement conversation?
Mm. I live in Huntington Beach, California. I was born in Colorado, grew up in Washington State, and I'm one of those that always wanted to move to California because of the sun. And so as soon as I graduated from college and I had my significant other, I said, "Would you be willing to move to California?" And he said yes. And so I've been here ever since. So that's why I'm in California. And so
Yeah.
is like who I am or what I'm about. I think this is a journey that maybe a lot of us have been on where I was in corporate sales for a very long time. But reflecting back on it, I kind of got on that hamster wheel. Several of my friends were in sales and doing really great. I worked at Nordstrom for quite a few years. I moved up into the buying offices and I loved it. But then I thought, oh, I need to get a real job. And so I ended up moving into sales, which really was never in my heart. I did great at it. And people would always say, "You're not the typical salesperson." And I think it's because I really just love that connection with my customers. And then as I had people reporting to me, loved that connection and loved meeting and exceeding sales and service numbers. But then flash forward, and the last position that I was in, Tiffany, the new owner that came on board had a very different approach and philosophy to the clients and to the employees. And it really, I struggled trying to kind of find that happy medium, but the values were so misaligned, such a cultural clash for me. And so I came to that crossroads. Do I continue in this vein? Do I go find another job in sales leadership? And I really did some soul searching and thought, I want to bring more of myself forward. I've been promoting these different products and services. Now I want to bring myself forward. So I ended up leaving that position, going back to school, which was at my age, really pretty different because I hadn't been in that kind of vulnerable kind of situation before, that beginner's mindset
Yeah.
and then dug deep into coaching and then seeing in my demographic what I was seeing with people going through struggles around retirement, as you kind of touched upon. And so then got advanced credentials in that. So,
I absolutely love and I'm obsessed when I interact with women who are a few years older, who are in that retirement age where it's like almost scary and taboo at the same time to like change careers. Cause it's like, what are you doing? Who are you to redefine yourself? And I find it so invigorating because it's just that reminder that like you aren't done until you're done.
love that.
Like you're not
Yeah.
done until you're done. And
Yeah.
I know that when I was younger, like my grandparents is like you went to work and then you retired and then you got old. Like your job was now to be an old person. Like
Yes. Yeah.
and you aren't learning anything new. You're set in your ways. Like there's no redefining yourself. You are who you are, the person you've been the last 30 years. And so
Yeah.
I get really excited when I meet people, living in a way that I see myself down the road. Like I'm never going to arrive to the final destination. There's always going to be something to learn and to grow. And if something isn't working or you get pulled into a new direction, like follow it. Where else are you going? Like,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. and not get wrapped into that blanket of comfort that's so uncomfortable. It's just
Yes.
quasi, yeah, it's just like low level. We don't have to live low level. We get to
Yes.
step into things. I talk about being the CEO of you, really leading yourself. And so if you do choose to leave career, then really taking that ownership and accountability to really decide what is it that you want for yourself in these next years. And I think people don't step into that. I think
Yeah.
that people oftentimes, you said, you're not done till you're done. I think people in their mind get done.
They're done. I
Yeah.
just saw an interview. It was probably in a reel, either on Facebook or on Instagram. Jamie Lee Curtis, the actress,
Yes.
when she's like, it was an interview of her talking about turning 60. And
Mm.
she was like, dude, like, if not now, when? You haven't done it. Like, the worst thing I could have imagined, she's like, when I turned 60, the worst thing I could have imagined was getting to the finish line and recognize, makes me emotional thinking about it, realizing that there was so much still left inside of me that I
Yeah.
didn't allow out, that just died
Yeah.
with me. And she's like,
Yeah.
so if not now, when? And she said something like she's produced 3 movies, has 2, like, pilots for sitcoms, like, all of these projects, like,
Mm.
from 60 to 63, like, more than she had done most of her career, because it was, like, that moment of, like, "If not now, when?" And I
Yeah.
think that goes back really beautifully and ties into what you were saying before, like, when we enter retirement, like, we need a connection. We need connection with people. We need connection to purpose. So if you don't mind, can you share a little bit around that topic there?
Yes, yeah. I think if it's okay, I think maybe the listeners would want to, because I'd like to know, like, what touched you, because that you were touched by that. Would you share with us?
Yeah. I think hmm, think it's a few things. I think it's having an aging parent and having already lost one. Like, I
Mm,
lost my dad when I was in my very early 20s.
yeah,
And so my mom, like, watching her enter her later years and what that looks like for her.
yeah,
Um, and some of the struggles, like mobility struggles she's been having.
yeah,
So that part of, like, I'm not done just knowing some of the hard things that she's experiencing right now. I think about myself in, like, the day to day, right? About how, especially when you're a business owner, and I don't want to make this business owner centric, because I think it's very similar when I was a W-2 employee as well. Um, you get in, you're trying to do a thing, you're trying to achieve a goal, you're trying to provide for your family, and there's this constant, like, evolution of self if you allow it to happen. And so that, like, I'm not done yet, and,
yeah,
like, it's okay that, like, it doesn't look the way that I've been working for it to yet.
yeah,
And, like, you're not done until you're done. Like, keep going, keep redefining yourself, keep recreating the offers, keep doing new things, because you're not stuck to who you were yesterday unless you
yeah.
choose to be, is so powerful to me, and is
Hmm.
like the song my soul sings for, like, the
Mm,
last year. And so when I
yeah.
hear other people talk about it, it's almost like my soul gets to, like, come out into the universe and be like, "Oh, they get it."
Yes, yeah, yeah, that you feel that energy.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so
Thank
much
you for
for sharing that.
asking.
Yeah,
Thank
well,
you
and
for
I think,
asking.
I mean, I think for anybody, because I'm in maybe a similar situation with aging parents that are really, really going through a lot of health issues, and it allows me, there's gifts there, because like you were sharing, you start to reflect on, well, then what's meaningful in my life, or what do I want for me? At the same time, our heartstrings for our parents, and what can I do to help them? And unfortunately, oftentimes there's not so many things. We can be that listening person, we can be that supportive person, but we can't change some things for them. And so, kind of surrendering to that, accepting that, and recognizing what gifts we can bring forward. So, all of that,
Yeah,
I think, especially as we're getting older, then we see more and more of that. So you're feeling it now. And so you're having this runway to your elderhood. You're starting to see, okay, I'm not going to be done till I'm done. And so what
yeah,
does that mean for me? And I'm willing to experiment, and I'm willing to try things, and I'm willing to fail forward or whatever we want to call it, because we know that failure is really learning. And all
Yes.
of those are
Yes.
fundamental for someone moving into retirement as well. Um,
Yeah.
but oftentimes, especially in the demographic that's of retirement age, um, there is this feeling of getting it done and pushing ahead and no pain, no gain, and not having that vulnerability, not being keyed in as much to that emotional environment that we all have, but that we push it away sometimes. So, um, but
Yeah.
but maybe you can ask the question again because I know I took us kind of off track a little.
No, you're good. I will ask you again. I was going to share what just popped up for me. Um, I just turned 40 back in August, and at the time of recording this, it's the beginning of December of 2024. And I was so excited, right? And I'll share a little. My mom was just like, "So, what's it like feeling like an old lady? Being an old lady? How old are you? How old are you?" And I was like, "Mom, I'm 40." She's like, "No, how old do you want to be for forever?" And I was like,
Mm,
"I'm 40." I didn't like I knew what she meant, but I didn't really understand what she meant.
yeah,
And she was just like, I was like, Mom, I am so excited to be 40. I think this is so cool. I think it's so freaking cool to be 40. Like, to be able to look back at everything I've accomplished, every hard day that I survived and came out a different person. Like, I just
yeah,
think it's so cool because not everyone is gifted the gift of time. And not everyone has allowed themselves to the gift of opening themselves up to new possibilities, to learn from where they've been, to figure out where they're going. And so I
yes,
think it's so cool. But
yeah.
I understand that, like, for her and for a lot of women in her peer group, that, and maybe I'm putting words in my mom's mouth because we didn't really talk about it. But I have a storyline that older people, they see like 40s and 50s. It's just like another example of them aging and dying and like the life they missed out on rather than the life they still get to create.
Yeah, no, I think that's one of the elements of the work that I do with people is around mindset and this idea instead of anti-aging where we're fighting it so desperately, we're leaning into it and have this pro-aging mindset and look at what is possible. You know,
Yes.
instead of looking at the lack, look at the abundance. Instead of looking at the loss, look at the gains. But it is a mindset shift and it is something that I think it's important that we raise it up on this call because, and in this conversation, because your mother, and you know, I think it's wonderful that you shared that it's maybe your perspective and it's not where she lives, but the majority of people do live in the way that you described, you know, and want to fight that aging, and then that kind of puts them in that mindset that things aren't possible and that, oh, I'm too old to do that, or that's I could have done that now then, but I'm
I'm
not
too
too old
old to
to do it.
wear that. I'm too old to go there. I'm too old to try that. And it's
Yes.
like, according to who?
Well, it'd be according to you know, because if that's that self-talk, if that's that negative self-talk, that's what comes out. And it struck me when you're sharing about Jamie Lee Curtis that, you know, that energy that she shared, you know, that she's doing so much, that comes from within. And so then that her light is shining and she's really that's contagious, right? That's attraction. People are going to then see, wow, she is vibrant, she is vital, she's not hanging it up. She's
Yeah.
not saying that I'm
Because
done.
what's the
Yeah.
alternative? That's what
Yeah.
I think about. Like, call me delusional for being excited about being 40 or whatever. What's the alternative?
Mm, well, I mean, yeah, it is then.
Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, ew.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it starts to get you into that victim kind of mindset or that, you know, oh, now it's too late kind of mindset. So then we stay stuck. We start to excuse things. We don't take accountability for our decisions. And so because we think, oh, the world is doing these things to me, it's an external kind of um, factor that's coming into play instead of looking what we have within. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and you could feel that way at every age, and so this is such a great thing I think for you to remember. You know, as you turn 41, and then you turn 50, and then you turn 60. You know, you can just be in that moment and look ahead to what's next. Because I do think about that idea of we don't want to pass on this earth with that song unsung. That's the saying
Mm.
that I kind of use. You know, we don't want that song unsung. So really thinking about that. I work with my clients about a no regrets retirement and really envisioning what that those days and weeks are going to look like. And then if they didn't have that time abundance that we think about in retirement 20 or 30 years ahead of us, and now it's constricted to 5, what would bubble up as the priorities? What would be most important? And then if you have no time left, what would you have regretted? But now we are in this position where we get to make some decisions and map out our future. I think oftentimes people just don't seize that opportunity. They don't really envision, what's possible and step into it. And that's what I do is dream a little bit with
Do
clients.
you find in your line of working with the beautiful humans that you get to work with that they were just counting down the days until they could get out and enter retirement, and then they're there and they're like, okay, now what do I do?
I think it's a variety. I think the overarching, really, Tiffany, is I think people think that you're supposed to retire at a certain age. And that's
Mm.
still kind of baked into the vernacular. I think things are shifting. So for your generation, I hope that's not the case. But that's such traditional thinking. I think that that came about, well, I don't think it came about with Social Security back in the 30s and when people were in the factories and fields and they were tired. And so at a certain age, then the government stepped in to kind of help them. And people generally lived a couple of years and then they expired. But that's way in the past. That's not the case any longer. We can work into our 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s. It's that mindset. And yes, let's be fair, there are going to be some physical things that come up for people and health things that come up. Absolutely. However, your mindset and how you think about things, that's not going to leave you. That's something you can foster and grow. You can pivot, you can see the possibilities if you're open to that. So I think that that's what is really critically important is that people recognize that it's really up to them to write that next chapter, bring forward with them all those things in their book of life, all those skills and passions, capabilities. Those don't go away. You're not starting over. But now where do you want to go with it? But it does start with that vision and it starts with that perspective around possibility.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Now, trying to think about how I want to ask the question that's like swirling in my head. We talk about like the non-financial pieces of retirement, right?
Yeah.
Which isn't really a common narrative. It's always, like you said, social security, your 401k, what are your investments so that you can live? How much, what is the minimum amount you're gonna be able to survive on so that you can retire and live to be 100, right? Without having to go back to work because you ran out of money. So we talk a lot around about money around retirement. But really, when you pull it all back, what are those non-financial pieces of retirement that no one's talking about?
Yeah, such a great question and a fundamental and foundational question. So there is that piece about having a vision. And I think oftentimes people come into retirement with on one end of the spectrum or the other, either this idealistic view that it is endless weekends, leisure, travel, freedom, stress-free, or on the other end of the spectrum where it's loss and aging and one foot into the grave. And so
Mm.
instead, by raising awareness, which we're doing in this conversation, and really emphasizing intention, making some decisions, trying some things, experimenting, having a vision, then we can bring it to the middle, more of this realistic optimism, which is what I really speak to. So that's a big piece of it, is really stepping into what does this look like for me? What do I want to make decisions about and choices about? But beyond that, too, when we look at career, purpose is oftentimes baked into it. We know what our key performance indicators are. We know what we need to accomplish. We know what we're going to be doing. When we move into retirement, we can lose that feeling of purpose. And I think that that can loom large for people. They can start to feel overwhelmed, like, oh gosh, I don't have purpose. So now I'm going to fail at retirement. And so let's dispel that too, because really purpose can be shifted into a verb, feeling purposeful, feeling like there's meaning, feeling like there's something that you're contributing to yourself or your significant people in your life or your community or the world. feeling purposeful. And it can be with that capital P, huge initiatives like starting a nonprofit or taking care of grandkids full time or volunteering. But it can be with a small P too, feeling like you're growing by reading a book or that you are taking care of a neighbor for a little bit or volunteering in some way, but it doesn't have to be with a capital P. So purpose is a big piece of it. Identity is absolutely fundamental. So oftentimes people confuse their identity with their role. So you're a business person, that's a role, but that's not who you are. There's so many other elements to you, and yet people feel like when they leave work, they leave a lot of themselves behind. So the identity piece, really bringing back up to the surface, what are things that you enjoy? And if you're not sure, then let's really think back to the things that really did light you up when you were younger, or things that you've wished you
Yeah.
could do.
And
Is that?
that's a really, I was thinking, like, that's a really good exercise to do now, regardless of retirement age or not. And that's something that I notice a lot in my line of work is that, you introduce yourself to someone or you ask someone about themselves and they immediately lead with a title,
Mhm.
rather than like pieces about them. And it's like those are
Yeah,
things you do. And while motherhood or your CEO role or whatever are parts of you, they're not you. And so like sometimes I get those three heads, especially in business settings, when someone will say, like, you go around and introduce yourself. Because I'm Tiffany. I love the color pink. I enjoy walking my dog down by the river. You can find me kayaking or hiking on the weekends. I'm a high school field hockey coach and I absolutely love my nieces. And oh, by the way, I help high achieving women create harmony between their health, their relationships, and the way they earn money so they can have it all at the same time without the burnout, stress, and overwhelm. But
yeah,
for a long time, it was what I did first because I thought that's who I was. It was I'm a nuclear chemist. I keep your lights on back when I worked in the power industry,
mm,
And so I think that that is such a great exercise for people, no matter how old you are, to
yes,
really, who are you?
yeah. Yeah, embracing our individual story. And I think again in the demographic that's retiring, that's just not, that really just isn't in the vocabulary. But I think you're pointing out, and that's why I'm glad that we're really talking about this for any age or life stage, because this is that runway. The majority of people will retire, at least, that's at least the way that things are set up in our society now. So at some point, the majority of people will retire. And so by having some of these things in place, then it's not a slash cut that one day you're in, the next day you're out. I love Project Runway, and I don't know if you ever watched that, but it's kind of
Back
like,
in the day, I did.
yes, yeah. And so it's like in fashion, one day you're in and the next day you're out. In career, one day you're in, the next day you're out. And then what are you looking at? We don't want it to be so black or white. We want to be putting some of these little stepping stones into place. And I think that that's where raising up the conversation and saying, what's that one little interest that you have? Or what's that friend that you haven't spoken with in a long time? Or what, from a health standpoint, is just that one little thing that you can do to move yourself in a direction that does feel more healthy and supportive of your goals. But not just waiting. So often people say, oh, when I retire, I will get into the gym or I'll eat healthy or things like that. And so why do we have to wait? So it is just shifting that mindset. But for those that are closer to that age or in that age where they are planning to leave career, then it can feel very overwhelming if they don't have that runway. And so these are all the piece parts that we want to surface and address so that that feeling around purpose and that sense of identity and that connection that we haven't spoken about, but we know that that's so critically important that we have a community. I know that you've spoken about that with other guests, and that feeling that sense of connection, and sharing some of those experiences with others, because we are human beings, we're social creatures.
Mhm.
We want that interaction with people. We grow
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
I think that's a huge piece as to why you see so many older people, working at Lowe's, being greeters at Walmart. Like the income part of it is so not important to them. They are looking for places to be seen, looking for places to have a conversation with other people and to like have a reason to show up for the day.
Yeah, yeah, you're hitting on so many of the important elements for sure. And so it is a matter, though, of then making some of those decisions with intention, as opposed to just falling into things. I've had several people come to me as potential clients, and we started working together, and they were mapping out their retirement plans. And it became very clear to me, like, why are you retiring? Because you're sharing that you have great balance in your life, you're doing things outside of work. It's very gratifying to you. The income feels good. You know what? So I don't advocate to retire. I just advocate that if you're going to retire, then retire fully, and don't just abdicate the decisions. So I talk about a retirement by design, not default.
Mm.
And that gets back to that whole accountability piece, not just saying, oh, I'm this age, so I'm supposed to retire. I should be doing these things. We know those are all external factors. And so instead, really keying into, but what's important to me? This is a really unique, exciting time in my life. How am I going to step into it? What could that look like for me? What's possible?
Oh, that's so, so good. And I think it's so just, oh, my heart is yelling yes, 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 like over and over and over again. And in my line of work now, I get to surround myself with like people who've been doing big things for a long time. And when you've been at the top of your game for a really long time, like the John Maxwell's or the Brendan Burchards, or like even Jamie Lynn Kern Lima, the founder of It Cosmetics, people are always like asking, like, well, when are you going to hang up your hat? Like, when are you going to retire?
Yeah,
And what they share is has really imprinted on my heart in a different way for such a long time now, which is like, why would I want to stop doing something that brings me so much joy and happiness? Because I've
yeah,
created a life and a career around the things that bring me joy and purpose. So,
yes,
like, I
yeah,
can't imagine stepping away from that. And I recognize that not everyone has that opportunity. There are people who literally have a career because that career gave them something external to the job. It gave them a roof over their head, ability to take their family on vacations. And so, like, maybe that kind of relationship with your career and work doesn't exist for you. But like you were saying, Wendy, what would that look like? Like, what
yes.
would your perfect life where everything was flowing harmoniously and brought you so much joy and fulfillment? What does that look like? And how do you start creating that for yourself so that you don't end up at retirement age going, well, do I retire? Don't I retire? Do I have enough? Don't I have enough? What am I going to do with myself? Am I going to get divorced because I'm driving my wife or my husband crazy now that we're home all the time? Like,
Oh, yeah, no,
what
all of
am
these things are realities for sure. Yeah,
right? Like
yes, yeah,
retirement is a transition just like every other stage of life. So why are we not preparing for it more than just financially of what that
yes.
looks like?
Well, and I think there is just that external focus, that people, like you're saying, people are saying to the individuals that you mentioned, when are you going to retire? That's that external focus. And I think a lot of times it's just a question that people ask. I don't know, but at the same time, it's a mindset, and it's like, what am I going to retire to? What am I retiring with? And for those individuals, they feel very gratified, just like the clients that I was speaking about, and they were really getting societal pressure or family pressure to retire. And so we need to take that accountability and say, well, what works for me? And when we're no longer feeling fulfilled, or we feel as though, okay, now I can step away from career because I do feel my finances are in order, then what can that look like for me? And then stepping into that, mapping it out, feeling confident about it, having this pro-aging mindset around it so that we stay open to the possibilities and trying things.
That's
So,
so,
so important. Yeah. So,
so
so
important.
really
That
important.
transition. And you know what? Like, what if you decide to rebrand retirement from a
Mm,
different word? Because like the thing that keeps popping up in my head, I live in the country, and so I think about like farm animals. When a farm animal is retired, like they're no longer a working horse, they become lame, they're not around long. Like,
yeah. That put out to
so
pasture.
why would we want to retire ourselves, right? Like that just
Yeah.
feels like I'm putting a foot in the grave. But I
No,
like that concept of transition what are you transitioning into? What's the next chapter that you're writing? And what
Yes.
are all of the pieces and parts that you would need to feel fulfilled every single day?
Yes, yeah. And what are the things you want to leave behind? Because oftentimes we have patterns or habits we're not even aware of, or that have been imposed upon us, or that we had to agree to in career. Now we're at choice. So let's be mindful about those as well, and really aware of, okay, what do I want to bring with me? And again, what do I want to leave behind? So I think all of those things are really important. You brought up too, just this idea that's going to escape me of with transitions and really harnessing the power of those. I work with that with clients with this idea that first we want to come to an ending. We really want to, and that's why retirement, like rituals, a retirement party and things, help put that period or that exclamation mark before we then start to reflect on, well, what looks good to me, what's exciting to me. There's a lot of work around transitioning in a way that is more supportive of us, starting with the ending, moving into what's oftentimes called the messy middle or the neutral zone. And before we jump into the new beginning, so many people jump into that new beginning right away. And that's what gets into this busyness factor and feeling almost like they have to justify their time post career by showing that
Mm,
they're doing all these things. And so that idea of human being rather than human doing is something that we want to kind of keep in mind, that we don't have to just be filling up that dance card. What are we filling it up with? And does that allow us to let our light shine? Does that allow us to feel like there's a reason to get up in the morning and feels meaningful to us?
that is so beautiful.
Mm.
That is so beautifully brilliant. Wendy, this has been such a great conversation. How do people connect with you outside of the show if they're looking for resources or to learn more about the work that you're doing?
Oh, thanks for that. Yeah, my website, the name of my company is Conflux Retirement Coaching, CONFLUX. So they can look on my website and send me a message. And I'm very active on LinkedIn under Wendy Leggett. So confluxretirementcoaching.com or Wendy Leggett. And I do have a little gift. If people would enjoy going through a little bit of what you and I spoke about today, I have a reflective exercise called No Regrets Retirement where you do start to envision, okay, what would those weeks and months look like? And then what would be most important to me? And what might I regret if I didn't really step into it now? So I really welcome people to take advantage of that little worksheet and then, hop on a call with me so we can just chat about it.
And where do they find is the worksheet on your website?
They can ask for it or in the show notes if you want to put
Okay,
bold steps. They can find it there. So.
cool. I will definitely do that. Well, Wendy, thank you so much for coming in and sharing your heart, your
Mhm.
message, and your wisdom with us today. I've had such a great time. And with that, that's Two Humans Talking. I'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.